This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
This is George Newbern, the voice of Superman.
And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
I can do this. I'm gonna hide my powers and be a normal man having a normal day, starting now.
Forget everything you know about the Man of Steel and get ready to see the son of Jor-El like you've never seen him before.
Who am I?
I know what Superman is.
Oh.
You think he's a plane?
It kind of looks like a bird.
My Adventures with Superman.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 311 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal. With me, my good friend, good brother, our other host, it's Liam. Liam, we are wrapping up our month-long celebration of the Man of Steel's 86th anniversary with an exciting trip to an Elseworlds. We did a couple re-reviews this month, including last week's with a very special guest, Nathan McKenzie from Superman the Animated Podcast. Just a wonderful time with him. And I think fittingly, Nathan himself talked about how he just recently relaunched his Superman the Animated Podcast to review the show that we're actually discussing today.
That's right. So for the first time on our own show this week, we are looking at the pilot episode for the My Adventures with Superman animated series. Season 1 having wrapped last year, and Season 2 about to premiere. Actually, it'll premiere right around the time that this episode drops, when it originally drops. So definitely excited to get to talk about this one. Usually we give things like this a few more years in between when we review them, but we have made a few exceptions in the past with some of the direct to DVD movies that have come out. So and as you said, this is about celebrating the Man of Steel, and this is fresh ground for us to cover. So excited to talk about this series today with the pilot episode, Adventures of a Normal Man, Part 1.
That's right. Yeah, the debut date is going to be a little bit more recent than most of the episodes that we've covered thus far. Not the most recent one. I think that might go to either Superman Red Son or the Justice League versus the Fatal Five, which we basically reviewed the week that they came out. So yeah, maybe not the most recent, but certainly more recent than a lot of the content that we cover. But yes, it'll be interesting to take a look at the latest incarnation of the Man of Steel in animation. But before we do, we're going to get the official IMDb movie synopsis for this week's episode. And of course, that is brought to you by the Pod Tower. Head over to youtube.com/the Pod Tower today. And not only will you get our entire podcast catalog available in one convenient streaming place, but you also get a pair of additional podcasts that also discuss the DCAU. One from Tim Talk, which covered every episode of the DC animated universe proper, as well as a bunch of other stuff I'm sure covered on those episodes. And then the ongoing Jump on the Batwagon podcast from the folks at Watchtower Database. They also have another spin-off podcast that they're doing, long-form interviews called Intergang, and it's all available in one convenient space for your streaming pleasure. That's youtube.com/the Pod Tower. Head over today and subscribe. And before we get the official IMDb synopsis, just for posterity's sake, I will mention that this episode, Adventures of a Normal Man Part 1, originally debuted here in the United States on the Cartoon Network on July the 6th, 2023, meaning we have not even passed the 1-year mark for this episode's debut at the time of this original airing of this podcast. Liam, it was dropped with episode 1 and episode 2, actually. Were dropped on the same night, and of course, it is streaming on one of the more popular streaming apps. They don't get any free plugs from us because they're not paying for it, but you can find it on a very popular streaming app.
This is the synopsis for the episode Adventures of a Normal Man Part 1, written by Josie Campbell, Brendan Cloher, and Jake Wyatt, directed by Jen Bennett, with music by Daniel Fucher and Dominic Lewis, and animation by Studio Mir. And that synopsis reads as such. Secret alien Clark Kent and his best... Secret alien is a really funny way to describe Superman.
Not
Secret-
incorrect, though, I guess, right?
No, no. All right, all right. Back to your regularly scheduled synopsis. Secret alien Clark Kent and his best friend Jimmy Olsen start their internship at the Daily Planet and meet fellow intern Lois Lane, who ropes them into investigating stolen military robots threatening Metropolis.
Despite the humorous way to describe Superman, I would say that's a pretty darn good plot synopsis.
Yeah, that's one of the better ones. What better ones we've had in a while here.
Must be. It's so recent. It must be AI written or something like that. Like they plugged it into Grammarly and they got their words correct. Got to run that through the AI filter to find out whether or not it was if AI was used.
Absolutely, but yes, we kick it off as many Superman stories do with a flashback to a town called Smallville. And we see a young Clark Kent playing in the yard of his parents' farm, and he's got a kite stuck up in a tree. Is trying to figure out a way to get up and rescue the kite out of the tree when he notices a car that's speeding along the road and is unaware of a big pothole it's about to hit. We see that it's a young mother who's very overwhelmed by her young child inside and just completely misses the pothole and or doesn't see it coming and hits it and spins wildly out of control. And Clark instinctually tries to run after it to try to help in some way. And we see this, we'll certainly talk more about this in visuals, how they visualize his powers in this show. But we see this blue electric light sort of begin to pulse through his eyes and around his body. And he suddenly can run at superhuman speeds and grabs onto the back of the car and pulls and is able to slow it down before it goes smashing into a tree, saves the mother's life. And before you know it, he speeds back across the street to the tree and decides he's going to take a leap. He's going to take a tall leap. And wouldn't you know it, the leap, he doesn't come down as he finds out he can fly, and he begins to fly off into the sky, having discovered these newfound powers. So we see a little bit of Clark as a kid. I think almost every one of the episodes in season 1 start with a little flashback like this. At least the first few do. Of young Clark discovering something about his Kryptonian heritage. But then we cut to present day, and can we just right off the back say that this Superman is the term himbo?
Clark. It's today.
It's today.
Hello, sir. Hi, Mr. White. Okay, shake gently. Do not crush his hand.
Hey, Clark!
Today just be normal. Today just
Be extraordinary. Mr. White, thank you for calling me in today because I've got one heck of a story for you. Pew pew! No, don't do that to your boss.
I'm Clark Kent, and this is a dream come true. Shoes.
This is it. This is the story that'll make you a real reporter. You can do this.
I can do this. I'm gonna hide my powers and be a normal man having a normal day, starting now.
We meet Clark and Jimmy as roommates, waking up for their first day at the Daily Planet.
Yeah, I'd say it's kind of like, do you remember how Marvel decided that Thor was suddenly going to be really dumb and in some ways almost break the fourth wall in that one comedy movie that they decided was going to be how the Thor character was going to be from now on? Like that's kind of similar direction that they go with characterization of Superman for here for sure. But
at least they're starting out with that as opposed
correct.
to deciding like 3 seasons in to make that his character.
Absolutely. That is the distinction, as opposed to establishing that he's a serious man and then changing him up halfway through it to appeal to Deadpool fans or whatever the reason was. But anyway, Marvel soapbox aside, yes, the Clark is immediately we're introduced to a guy who doesn't seem to understand or recognize his own strength as he's continually destroying things from his alarm clock to his clothes to his shoes to the sink. He's just trying to act, as the title of the episode would have you believe, be a normal man for once, as that it is his first day at the Daily Planet. He's trying to kind of keep it together, trying to control his excitement and just act normal, but it's very obvious that he doesn't quite understand or know what normal even is, as will be the running theme here as we go throughout. He tears his shoe in half. He decides he's going to go out for a run to be a normal man on this normal day of his first day at the planet, and encounters a what else but a kitten stuck up in a tree that happens to match the image on a lost kitten poster. He saves the cat, delivers it to the young girl who is missing the cat, and then decides he's going to return to his normal, acting as a normal man now that his heroic deed is done for the day. He arrives at a local bakery where he seems to be a frequent customer, because the owner of the bakery seems to recognize him almost immediately. Of course, not before a little meet cute, as they call it, or did call it. I'm sure that's not a phrase that's used anymore. It's probably out of the zeitgeist of popular culture. But for a period of time, it was a meet cute as Lois Lane is actually entering into the same bakery. Clark rips the handle off the door just before she gets there, but is able to reapply it before she's any of the wiser, opening the door for her. And there's some flirtation that happens.
Hi there. After you.
Thanks. See you in there, big guy.
Hey. Hello.
Hey.
My name is...
Clark! Oh, those repairs you did on the back door are wonderful. Oh, and I have the 3 dozen donuts you wanted to eat all ready to go. Such a good appetite, this one.
No, see, it's not all for me.
But he gets the sprinkles all over. That's why we made him the Bib.
Today's my first day of work, and
Honey, Clark is here.
Good man. Get his bib.
Thank you. Well, now you've seen me in a bib.
Uh-huh.
So I'm just gonna leave before this gets any worse. Goodbye forever. Sorry, I'll fix the front door later.
As Clark goes in, he tries to be as smooth as possible, but he's a bit of a goofball, and he's a bit nervous and can't seem to get out of his own way. And of course, his first interaction with this older woman that's the owner of the bakery, she does nothing to help his riz, I will say that, as she very much embarrasses him, going as far as to say that he had ordered 3 dozen donuts to eat on his own, and he has to wear a bib to make sure that he doesn't get the sprinkles anywhere. But in the midst of this embarrassment, she does thank Clark for repairing their back door and all the work that he's done around, which seems to impress Lois a little bit. But Clark, of course, being completely embarrassed and humiliated by this woman making him wear the bib, decides he's going to excuse himself with the donuts after establishing that he is not going to eat all of them. And that's where we cut to Lois, who is walking into, she also is headed to the Daily Planet, which of course is the bit of comedy here. It's a romantic, like a 90s or 80s romantic comedy bit here, where your 2 leads are headed to the same place, but of course have no knowledge of it. But the viewer, of course, knows that they're both headed to the Daily Planet, and you're just kind of waiting for them to realize that they both are there. So as Lois enters Perry White's office, we get a little bit of information about their relationship and how she's not quite the established reporter as she is in perhaps most Superman lore, as it's made very apparent that she's one of the interns, and that she's there not to break news, not to be the gumshoe detective beat reporter, but she's there to scan things and also help the other interns learn their position and their job. So that's where we get Perry making the introduction to the new interns, which of course happen to be Jimmy Olsen and Clark.
Metropolis, which means thieves with dangerous war machines are loose in our city. People need to know about this. So, ready for me to bust the story wide open?
No, Lois, you're an intern. The only reason I called you in today was to meet them.
Hi.
You?
You.
These are the new interns. I want you to show them the ropes and get...
They can help me with the story.
Oh, have you considered that these robots might have come from beyond the stars?
They came from an army base.
There's only so many places to hide them.
I've already got to leave.
It could be the sewer dinosaurs.
So we follow up.
Mothman.
Meet my source.
Mer people. Mer people.
Find the robots.
And get the story.
Then what are we waiting around here for?
Donut, Mr. White? Chief?
New interns, out. Old intern, stay. You do not report the news. You do not leave this building. Your job is to teach the interns how to scan things and make coffee. That's it.
Mr. White, for the good of Metropolis.
For the good of me, you need to stop coming in with these wild ideas. Do what I tell you to do. Lane, this is your last chance.
So, much to Lois's chagrin, she realizes that that she's out to sort of babysit, despite her desire to be more of a serious reporter. And meanwhile, by the way, I probably glanced over it, but on the travel from the bakery to the Daily Planet that Clark and Jimmy were making, Jimmy is actually established as sort of the comic relief and generally very oblivious about everything, as he's just sort of talking about space aliens, and he's very clearly a conspiracy theorist. He wouldn't be a stranger on some of the deepest, darkest parts of like Reddit and or Twitter. I feel like he's out there sharing the conspiracy theories, the alien conspiracies, the government's up to something. He's got a bunch of different explanations, much of which Clark tries to dismiss and Lois ignores in the midst of his diatribe. But it's pretty funny. But as he's going off on one of them, he nearly gets hit by a car that Clark has to save him for. Well, it's not a car. It's a giant garbage truck being driven by a shady individual that Clark just happens to make note of is driven by somebody that perhaps isn't working for the sanitation department of Metropolis.
That's right. And after they chat, as you mentioned, with Lois and Perry in Perry's office, Perry makes it pretty clear that he doesn't want Lois to keep trying to investigate these reports of giant robots that have been seen around the city that are missing, and tells her to just keep an eye on the new interns. But as Lois comes out of Perry's office, she decides to play a little fast and loose with the truth, and tells Clark and Jimmy that Perry gave her the green light and that they're all going to go off and try to investigate this. And at that point, we cut away to that said shady individual in the garbage truck, which we find out. We don't get a first name, but this is the character of Leslie Willis, someone we just recently talked about in the DCAU version of, the woman who would be Livewire. And she is talking to one of the other criminals here, and they're starting to feel the heat. They need to figure out how to get rid of everything. But she notes that all of the usual fences and people that they would sell their ill-gotten gains to have suddenly all gone quiet at the same time, and so they have to find out something else to deal with this instead.
Don't touch that.
What took you so long, Willis? The crew was getting restless.
Our fence wasn't at the drop point. We have no buyer.
What the?
It gets better. Every buyer, fixer, or fence in Metropolis has just disappeared on us. We're stuck here.
Leslie, we can't just sit in a warehouse full of freaky stolen science weapons till the cops show up. We don't even know what half this stuff is. What are we gonna do?
I don't know, Badger. Why don't we panic real loud in front of the thieves and killers we hired for this job? What we need to do is keep moving. If we can find a way out of town, then Which one of you messed with the robot?
They decide they're going to initiate a plan B. And from there, we cut back to Clark, Lois, and Jimmy, who are walking around the streets of Metropolis trying to investigate. And they come across, talk about a DC Comics deep cut here. In the comics, they were known as the Newsboy Legion, but here they are the News Kid Legion, a bit more of an updated version. And here they're just supposed to be kids who help deliver the papers. I don't think they don't still like 12-year-olds deliver papers in this in the real world, do they? I don't think that's a job.
So there are neighbors on my block that still get the printed newspaper. And they're also old enough to collect Social Security, but I don't think kids would be delivering. Yeah, kids aren't delivering the newspaper. I see a gentleman pull up in a minivan and get out and drop the newspaper. Right. I don't think it's been kids delivering newspapers on bicycles for many years. But it's just a trope, right?
Absolutely, it's suitably retro, even in this more modernized, futuristic anime Metropolis that we're set in. But yes, they mentioned all these kids. Not only are they're sort of amateur reporters in their own right with their own little publication that they're trying to get out there. We get introduced to all of them, including their leader Flip, who mentions that they had seen and heard some things around this warehouse, and they decide they're going to head down there, and that the News Kid Legion will sort of keep up and keep looking around. So they do head to the warehouse near the docks. But unfortunately, as here's where Lois's little bit of stretching the truth comes back to haunt her, as after Perry had several attempts to contact Lois to tell him to come back to the planet, he decides to contact Clark. Right as they get to the warehouse, they discover that all of the robots that were inside are now gone. And Clark gets a call from Perry telling him that they need to get back to the planet. And we have this first moment of immediate friction where it's all kind of been like doe eyes and blushing between Clark and Lois so far. But we have this moment where he realizes that he's been lied to, and obviously pretty important tenet of almost every version of Superman is his affinity for the truth. And so he and Lois have a little bit of an argument where she insists that, we need to investigate this. Nobody else is.
Hello? Clark Kent here.
I know Lane is dodging me, so I'm going to tell you what I texted her. All three of you need to get back to the planet right now, or don't bother coming back at all.
Port of Metropolis! This is from a dock worker's jacket. They're moving the robots to the docks. Come on, we can catch them and then we can...
Harry just called. Lois, you lied.
I mean, technically, yes, but you wouldn't have helped me if I told the truth.
You didn't give us the chance.
Because this was too important. The people of Metropolis need to know what's happening in their city, and...
This isn't about the city, Lois. It's about you. I trusted you, and you used me, and Jimmy, just so you could get your story.
Come on, Clark. We're a team.
We're not a team. We're just two dummies who listened to you because we didn't know any better. Now we do.
Fine. I don't need your help anyway.
Clark decides he's going to leave, and Jimmy is somewhat against his will, stays with Lois as they continue to search around the docks. They actually do come across Leslie Willis and these giant robots as Jimmy and Lois kind of have a little bit of more conversations about whether or not Lois should have lied to Clark. And we see Clark kind of having those same realizations because he's sort of questioning himself of would he have helped Lois if she had told him the truth. But as this is all going on, we see Lois and Jimmy come across said giant robot along with some unarmed gang of I don't know, they have laser weapons and stuff. but Leslie Willis and her gang, and it is this funny because this also feels like a trope, not just in superhero stuff, where like someone's eavesdropping and they're like literally 1 foot away and somehow they don't notice them.
Right.
But here Lois and Jimmy do get noticed. Like when Leslie looks over and sees at them and then they cut over to how close Lois and Jimmy are. It's a very funny visual. I don't know if I think it was a visual joke of like, well, yeah, of course they saw you. You're
Right.
literally just like hanging out behind this.
And Jimmy's got a
container.
gigantic like telephoto lens.
Yes.
Sticking.
They
in.
are not. Yes, they are not blending in at all.
Look, I know Clark, and
I can't believe him. What is wrong with your dumb, beautiful coward of a best friend?
Clark's just, he just grew up in a... Wait, did you say beautiful?
Then he says I'm the selfish one. I mean, yes, I lied, but he wouldn't have helped me unless I had. Not like he helped that old lady with the bib, or helped me with Flip, or brought everyone donuts. Or I was being selfish.
Lois?
I got him fired from his dream job. All to chase a bunch of robots that might not even be in the city anymore. And...
Lois!
Whoa.
We found the robots.
And the people who stole them.
Huh?
Hey! Someone take care of this.
Flip actually is riding by on her bike and sees Jimmy and Lois getting chased by the robot and goes, and I don't quite understand how she knew exactly where to find Clark, but she does. She tells him that Lois and Jimmy are in trouble and asks them what they should do. And before she gets an answer, she looks up. She feels that gust of wind, and Clark is suddenly gone. And here's where we get kind of our finale and our big action beat of the episode, as Clark has to find a way to save the day without immediately revealing his. Well, he can't reveal a secret identity that he doesn't have yet, but he doesn't want to reveal those superpowers just yet.
That's right. So if you weren't sure, like me, this is my first viewing. I wasn't sure. I was like, all right, well, does he have a Superman suit underneath of his Clark Kent persona? Is he hiding it? Like, what? We understand that we jumped from his childhood to this portion where he's starting his first day at the Daily Planet, but perhaps he's been in and around Metropolis with that line that Leslie has about all of the fences and people that they normally send things to just sort of drying up, sort of led me to believe it's like, oh, well, maybe he's been out fighting crime and that's how, he's already established as Superman. He has not, though, as you mentioned. We quickly learn here there's no super suit underneath of the Clark disguise, but he realizes there's no real time to adjust. He runs back just in time. I will also mention part of the funny bit that they do there is that when Lois and Jimmy are discovered, Leslie yells at her gang to take care of them, and one guy just runs over and hits the button to release one of the robots, and she goes, "Why would you do that?" Which I thought was really funny. It's equally funny as we get further into the episode, obviously, but at least initially here, one robot running around chasing Lois and Jimmy, and Clark decides at the last second he has to step up and do something. Lois sees him arrive back on the scene, and he tries to kind of stand up to the robot that immediately backhands him and whacks him across into a bunch of boxes and crates and things that fall on top of him. It appears that Clark is out for the count as Lois and Jimmy continue running away from the giant robot. And so Clark uses this opportunity to, as he begins to wake up, realize that he has to do something to perhaps disguise his look, just as Lois and Jimmy are about to be smashed by the robot. He passes by what I assume are a bunch of port worker uniforms. It's sort of like a firefighter's jacket, a long jacket with the hood, and he borrows one of those as he speeds past, and he begins to take on the robot. And another trope that feels like it needs to be established, especially when we're talking about the Superman versions of Superman that we've reviewed, whether it's Fleischer Superman, DCAU Superman, or this Superman, he's got to fight a giant robot, right? He's got to get into it with the giant mecha. And what better opportunity to do so here than taking on this one giant robot who he puts up a valiant effort and a valiant fight against, is able to eventually overcome one of the robots despite taking a lot of damage. And it's at that point that, as we mentioned, Leslie says, the plans changed, screw it, she doesn't care anymore, and she releases all of the robots at that point. So at this point, Clark comes face to face with 4 robots at one time, having just barely defeated one on its own, and it's not looking good as he's taking quite the beating. And it's at that point that a trope that we actually talked about just a few weeks ago, we get to see Lois in the very first episode here save Superman. She is able to get past the robots as they're fighting Superman and begin to deactivate them by just hitting these buttons that are on these shipping containers that they were in. She's able to disable all but one of them, who realizes that I guess they're sentient robots. I know that this is a robot that there's more about these robots that comes up later on in the series from what I read. But the robot realized that she was going to disable it, destroys the shipping container so that it can't be disabled that way. And it's not looking good. But just as things appeared to be bad, going from bad to worse for Lois, and perhaps for her to be sent to her doom, Superman sort of reaches deep down, and I don't know, does he go Super Saiyan here? What? I assume this is explained as the series goes on, but it's very similar to what happens in the very first scene where this bit of electricity sort of begins to form in and around his eyes. His eyes turn blue. This time, there's a flash to a piece of land back in Smallville where the Superman S logo seems to electrify and light up, and then we see the same logo appear via electricity. I said it's Super Saiyan, or they're just giving a sweet, sweet homage to that 90s Superman blue here.
I was going to say, I think it's a bit of both, because we'll talk about it in visuals. There's so much anime influence on this that I'm sure that's part of it. But yes, the fact that it's all done in electric blue coloring is not an accident.
Well, there you are. But whatever it is, he's able to power up strong enough to defeat the final robot itself, and that allows him to save Lois. She, at no point during the fight does she see his face. She calls out to him as he's flying above her.
Hello? Who are you? Clark!
A normal man having a normal day, huh? Who am I?
Clark! 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 I'm sorry I lied. You were right. I was being selfish and just left us, but you came back and I'm sorry.
Clark? You're okay!
Jimmy, please tell me you got that.
Every second of it, I have pictures of a man flying through the air. He's gotta be an alien. Everything I've ever believed in is real!
That's where we kind of wrap things up as Clark and Lois sort of have this brief just sort of discussion, Lois apologizing for being dishonest, and them realizing at this point that Jimmy was able to get just a massive amount of pictures, and that it's going to be all worth it because Perry's going to be thrilled with the story that they're going to break, which cuts us immediately to Perry's office, who's looking at the photos and says it's all a bunch of crap, that all of the pictures are out of focus and that he can't do anything with it, that he's furious with them, but at least we learned that he's not firing them. But he reassures them that they better not pull any crap like this ever again, and that we sort of have this little tiny postscript with Lois realizing, not quite getting the gist of what Perry was saying. All that she got from it was that they need to now get a interview with this Superman, and then Perry will finally respect them and allow them to be full-time reporters at the Daily Planet.
Lois was right about the robots, and we all stand by the story we broke, because we're a team. Sir?
All interns out. Go. I'll figure out what to do with you tomorrow.
We're not fired? Does that mean you'll run our story, Chief?
I'll run your story on the day you get me a photo shoot with your very real flying man. Now, out.
Lois?
Whoa! This is great! We just have to get an exclusive interview with Superman, and then Mr. White will have to take us seriously.
That's your takeaway from all this?
Yep.
And I promise, from now on, no more secrets. You in, Clark?
Of course. Lois?
Yes! And no matter where he goes, no matter where he hides, we will track Superman down and force him to tell us all his secrets. And then we'll publish them. This is the best day of my life!
She asks if Clark is in on this plan to get a exclusive with Superman so that they can work together. And she mentions them being a team, the three of them together, and that their next story is going to be solely focused on Superman and exposing all of his secrets. Clark, very clearly uncomfortable with this, sort of nervously just looks on. And that's kind of where we wrap the episode for this very first episode of My Adventures with Superman. So, all right, Liam, let's I guess we can break down the plot of the episode. So, interestingly, I think, Liam, from my perspective, I came into this with a completely blank slate. I didn't have any expectations. I hadn't watched this before. I think we mentioned you had watched it at least one time prior. So even then, we're not going to be as familiar with this or as any of the other cartoons that we've covered, more than likely. So I went in with a completely blank slate. There's also, as we talked about with Nathan last week, for this show, there's not a lot of press. There's not a lot of publicity. There's not a lot of talk going on. Maybe within the next couple weeks, now that season 2 is dropping, it might get a little bit more. But there wasn't a lot of fanfare for a show that was, I'm pretty sure, announced in or around the same time that Batman Caped Crusader. I feel like it was at one of those fandoms that they talked about this. But it has not gotten the public acknowledgement that or interest that Caped Crusader has, I feel like. So I think it's interesting that maybe because of that it worked to its advantage, because I had a hoot with this. Like, I thought this was a hoot. I really enjoyed, I think, the characterizations that they went with everything. You're kind of starting brand new. You're taking some of the familiar tropes. Obviously, they're working in the Daily Planet. But you're establishing, like you said, this version of Superman is very different than what we have seen, especially in the DCAU. It's different than the Smallville version of Clark. It's different than the classic Christopher Reeve version of Clark. It stands kind of on its own in that he's clearly very innocent and very good. And in this episode, he's still starting out, like literally day one here in Metropolis, essentially establishing himself. But it feels very authentic to the character, but not just a rubber stamp of everything else that's come before it. So I think we talked about that in our bonus episode recently of Caped Crusader. Like, that's important, like being able to give writers and people and directors and people that are working on this show the ability to play in the sandbox, to keep things familiar enough, but also do things that make this version stand out. And I feel like they did that with characterization of all of our characters here. Lois still has that like rebel hothead, I'm going to do what I want in order to get ahead in my career. Clark, very innocent. I love Jimmy's completely out of left field, though. Like, I don't know of a Jimmy Olsen that's established as like a conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat wearing guy, and that's very clearly what they're going with here. You don't really get. It's pretty much them three that you really get the most of. I mean, Perry White is there, and he's kind of like the supervisor dad character or something, like right. These kids that are gonna turn his hair gray or make him lose his hair. But so I would say very early on, and this is another thing that we've talked about, it's important to establish when we're watching these episodes, especially for shows that we've not watched before, not reviewed before, if we're starting with episode 1 for the very first time, is this thing piquing my interest enough or keeping my interest enough to want to see more episodes down the line. And I think enough in this story here and the story that they told, it's not complicated. It's very simple. It's by the numbers. I think the Superman, My Adventures with Superman wiki even drew some pretty clear parallels to the initial Fleischer Superman cartoon as far as the story, Superman fighting giant robots. So it's not a difficult story, but you're establishing characters already that have a lot of personality, a lot of character, and are enjoyable to kind of watch, and you kind of want to root for and see what their dynamic does going forward. So I really, really enjoyed the plot, and I was really, really surprised by it, to be honest.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, this is my second viewing. That is, I think, what strikes me about this show in general, and this episode being the first one. And obviously, as we know, it debuted with part two came on the same night or debuted the same day. So it's a little bit different how we're watching it, just part one by itself. But even just in part one here, even though we don't get the suit up, we don't get, the iconography of him in the red and blue suit. It feels like Superman. It feels like Lois Lane. It feels authentic to the bones of those characters, but to your point, it has a real like exuberance and life and to it that I can't really think of another superhero cartoon, at least not one that's come out in the last few years, that has this sort of life to it. It feels very, very modern and fresh in a good way. And again, a lot of that, I think, as we'll talk about, certainly again in visuals, but this obviously takes a little bit of, from whether it's Dragon Ball Z or some of the other, sort of very popular Eastern animation, where you have, your trio of friends who are getting into different adventures together, and you have your big powerful main guy and his two friends that are kind of going behind, running around behind him. So there's definitely some of that to it as well, that I'm sure people that are maybe more well versed in Eastern animation maybe would see these as more obvious tropes than we do, not being huge fans of that world. But yeah, to me, this feels, as far as super United States based superhero cartoons, this has such a unique energy to it, and it just feels very vibrant and alive. And I think having most of the episode focus just on really nailing down who Clark, Lois, and Jimmy are as people, how they interact with each other, and then how they, what sort of drives each of them. You see so much of this episode is from that first scene in the flashback to Smallville to him when he's out jogging, where that feeling of like, I want to have a normal life and be a normal person, but I also can't look the other way when something's going wrong. And that, that's such a classic Superman, archetype. But again, just put in a different package than has been done before. The same thing with Lois. Very classic Lois Lane of, her drive to find the truth and to uncover the story leads her into, she sometimes forgets to look before she leaps. Again, very classic Lois Lane archetypes here, but just take it in a little bit of a different direction than we're used to. So, and also kind of all starting them off on somewhat equal footing. I mean, Lois has already been an intern, and this is Clark and Jimmy's first day, we're told. So she's a little bit ahead of them, but they're kind of all on equal footing, as opposed to Clark kind of starting with Lois and already established as like a top reporter, like we've seen in Superman the Animated Series, for instance, or some of the other versions of these characters. So yeah, like I said, it's you're doing a lot of familiar things in a different way, and that is such a tightrope to walk, to do something new while not completely throwing out what's made these characters endure for the last 86 years. And this is a great first chapter. Like I said, it's just they really spend a lot of time in a good way hammering down Clark, Jimmy, and Lois so well in this first episode that You're rooting for all of them, and you're kind of you care about all of them when they're put in mortal danger at the end, or even just their like interpersonal stuff. When Clark and Lois have that argument, you're like, oh no, like it's like this bit of how they kind of meet each other, and there's clearly something here immediately, but also there's a little bit of betrayal because they both have different ways of sort of going after the truth, while the truth remains so important to both of them in different ways. So yeah, there's some really really fun stuff that's all packed into here. And then as we'll talk about in a minute, you get a bunch of cool robots and smashing and flying, and you get all the Superman stuff. Although again, he's not in the suit yet, but you get plenty of the classic action and everything you'd expect to. So it's great fun.
Yeah, I think what also kind of sets it apart, and maybe I've been Snyder washed into thinking that you can only establish characters in gritty, dark, franchises in order to establish them as serious without kind of making fun of the characters. I will give you just and the listeners my quick 2-second, maybe not 2-second, 2-minute thought process on the difference and how there should be a middle ground between Snyderverse, which some of those movies are fine. I like some of those movies.
Yeah.
And Marvel. Some of those movies are good. I like some of those movies. However, nowadays it feels like the only option that you're given is either dark, gritty, murder, death, everything sucks, bad, and every character is quipping and there's a joke and there's no real consequences for any of your characters, and nobody dies and nobody stays dead, and your villain is defeated via giant sky beam at the end of your movie. Like, it just doesn't, and some of that crosses in between the two. But I feel like there is a way that you can establish a serious superhero having a lighthearted side and it not feeling like it's insulting to the person watching the show or the movie. And it's doesn't feel like you are bogged down in the realness of the crappiness of how bad life can be sometimes. So I like that sort of, again, this is just one episode, but for this episode, I feel like the writers did a wonderful job of balancing that, where you have this real life or death situation at the end, giant robots, Superman fighting them. It's life or death for some of your characters. If he doesn't defeat them, what's going to happen to the rest of the city? And you also have jokes about him breaking door handles off accidentally multiple times, smashing his alarm clock, saving an oblivious Jimmy Olsen, eating a bunch of donuts and getting embarrassed by the bakery lady. Like, all of that is in the same show and feels pretty balanced and doesn't feel like one or the other takes precedent. So it's nice and refreshing to have that type of writing and to have that specifically in a superhero vehicle. So, for all those reasons, I think being able to establish that, being able to have a really effective way of introducing, you had to introduce your main characters here, 3 or 4 specific people. It didn't feel overloaded, didn't feel overwhelmed. We didn't get a full Clark backstory and Krypton exploding and all of that stuff. But I think that the foreshadowing and the additional kind of flashback scene worked effectively based on how they tie it in at the end. For all those reasons, and just because of how enjoyable everything was, I ended up giving Plot a very strong 8 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I gave it the exact same score of 8, just for all the reasons we've already talked about. Just a real good time.
Yeah, I don't think there's any other words to describe it. So let's go ahead and move on to our next category, which is going to be animation and visuals. And Liam, as you mentioned, Studio Mir was responsible for this. Our director was Jen Bennett. Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about this. As you mentioned, Liam, highly stylized in the Eastern animation style. Everything about this screams anime. We will or I will on our behalf establish and say, growing up, we didn't watch a ton of Eastern animation. We were not Pokemon guys, Yu-Gi-Oh, Dragon Ball Z. That was not in our wheelhouse. We were not watching those cartoons as we were growing up. So our affinity and appreciation and things that we might see or notice, as you already mentioned when we were discussing plot, might not stick out to somebody who is a big fan of those things. So forgive us if we miss something or if we mischaracterize something. I will say, I have not always had the strongest affinity for the general anime style of drawing human beings with the giant eyes and the tiny mouths and the little lines and the pink cheeks when you get embarrassed and all that stuff. Or I think, however, having watched enough of Teen Titans, because that was sort of like the first introduction to a series that had more of an Eastern animation influence, kind of brought me into like, hey, I feel a little bit more comfortable. I understand some of it's just it's like the punchline is to really drive home the emotion or whatever their character is experiencing. Just as you might see with a word bubble or, an added effect in a comic book panel. It doesn't take the realism away from the show that you're watching about a superhero that can fly and jump over tall buildings in a single bound. It's stylistic choices. So, shout out to Teen Titans, and subsequently Teen Titans Go for, allowing me to appreciate a little bit more of that Eastern animation influence. But, this is definitely straight up right off the bat. The first thing you notice in that opening scene, the scene is obviously it's a flashback, as we talked about, of a young Clark Kent. And I don't know if it was meant to, in order to establish that it was a flashback right off the bat, or if it was just a stylistic choice. But you have the framing around almost the entire scene is sort of that whitish glow that you would tend to see in some other Pokemon clips or stuff like that you would see back from that used in that styling choices. I did think that it settled in pretty quickly. There was not a lot or overuse of some of those giant emotional beats where the characters' heads get really big or their faces get really small, or they're punctuated specifically, in the scene with Clark and Lois and Jimmy talking to Perry and him getting frustrated that they're hanging around his office and not doing their work and all that. And when Clark offers him the donuts, that was like one scene, but the rest of it, I think, is animated so very beautifully, right off the bat, that him stopping the car from hitting the tree. As we've already mentioned, he kind of gets this super power up thing happen to his eyes, and you see the electricity come out. And we mentioned, Super Saiyan, maybe mixed with a little bit of the classic 90s Superman blue illusion there, but some really, really interesting, great stuff. And that's not even getting to our third act, where most of the animation stands out pretty well. What did you like as far as what you saw? What stood out to you?
Yeah, I loved the just the character designs in general. Doug Hong is credited as the lead character designer in the credits here. I love how, even though, again, this is still like they're all sort of the young versions of these classic characters. Like Clark is like 6'5". He just like towers over everyone in every
big guy.
scene.
Yeah.
He has this like big, like it reminds me, even though he's not as thick or wide, it reminds me in some ways of how the late Tim Sale always drew Superman. If you've ever read like Superman for All Seasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just this big, thick, corn-fed thumb of a man. Like you just got real big, broad shoulders, and like I said, he just kind of towers over Jimmy and Lois a lot. And even there's a couple of scenes where like Lois throws her arm around him or whatever, to like where she's gonna pitch him her wild ideas or whatever, and he's literally having to bend down so that she can put her arm around him, or so that she and Jimmy can high five over his head. He has to like duck down. So there's some kind of funny little sight gags of just how massive of a person he is, which I really enjoy. Yeah, I like the Lois and Jimmy designs as well. Again, I think it just matches. We'll talk about it in a minute. The voice performance and the writing has this real youthful exuberance to it. And yeah, I love them, the way they all play off of each other. The bit in the donut shop is really cute. The old lady who's, again, I guess for added comic relief, she's like 3 feet tall. She's like Yoda size. She's like standing, tiny. And she's standing on the counter and still isn't quite as tall as Clark, as she's throwing the bib on him and everything. Like, it's a really, some of the visual gags and stuff that they did with that, I think are a lot of fun. So that stood out to me. Yeah, the way the action is visualized, we can get to in a minute, but yeah, I think the character designs, the look of the city, a lot of, as far as like the sky and everything, we have this kind of a lot of like oranges and purples and kind of it feels like it's almost always twilight when they're outside of Metropolis. At least in this first episode, has this real like autumn color scheme. Yeah,
like yellowy, orangey. It's reddish, even some pinkish at times too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a couple sequences right at the end of the episode after he's defeated the robots finally, where Clark kind of flies up above the clouds and is toward the sun. Some really beautiful color work and great work by the background design team as well in this one. So that outside of the action, I think those are the big things that stood out to me.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think the characters themselves, again, they're creating their own versions of the characters. Obviously, I think Perry White was played by Lawrence Fishburne, obviously in the Snyderverse. Not the first time that Perry White has been portrayed as somebody that's black, but I don't know that Jimmy Olsen has been black in comics before.
No, he was African American in the Supergirl show.
Oh, that's right. Okay,
but he's also like that dude is like 6'5" and like the most handsome man you've ever seen. Because it was a CBS then CW
that's
show,
right.
So it kind of had to be. But
that's right.
Just a beautiful man. Whereas this is a different, a little bit of a different look even than that. He's very much still kind of the young, the young. Although I guess he and Clark are the same age because they're roommates, and I don't know if they mentioned in this episode, but they mentioned at some point they went to college together. So
gotcha.
I guess he's supposed to be the same age as Clark and Lois, but he's a little shorter than them, and he has that very, very much the teen sidekick that you might see in any superhero story, or again, and probably in a lot of animes as well.
Absolutely. I think the very first scene that they introduce him in, as he and Clark are walking towards the Daily Planet, and it's either that or the scene where they're actually in Perry's office, but they keep cutting to him as he's giving these conspiracy theories, and like the whole scene darkens around his face as he's giving these dark conspiracy theories, and then like they cut back to I think it is with Lois there, because they cut back to Lois and Clark, and the scene gets bright, and then they cut back to him again, and the scene goes dark again. Very, very funny, done for comedic effect, obviously. But yeah, I love the character of Jimmy in this. It's certainly a fun portrayal. As you mentioned, he's pretty much the comic relief, and then Perry White's the straight man, just absolutely having none of the hijinks that's going on with his 3 interns. As you mentioned, Leslie Willis also in the episode pre-Live Wire, so nothing other than like a buzz cut, like a buzzed undercut. Do we have to report for her look being a little bit different? I guess she's a blonde in this as opposed to a brunette in her Leslie Willis garb. Not a shock jock DJ either. She's a gun for hire. But yeah, I think the be all end all for the episode, if you're going to watch one scene, it's the mecha fight, which, I mean, if you're going to do anime, you might as well have a mecha. You gotta do something with that. And it's basically Transformers versus Superman in this final scene. Very, very interesting. they are definitely CGI with the cell shading on top of it. You can tell by the way they move, which again, understandable in modern animation. You want something to be able to move a certain way, you're going to use CGI to complete that process. It does obviously stand out a little bit from the way that they move. It's just not as it's either way too smooth or not as smooth as everything else. I never know. I think it's probably way too smooth. But the sequence between Superman and the first robot that he fights is really great. He gets beat up, beat to shreds. Really pretty brutal. Gets pounded into the ground a bunch of times by the robot. He overpowers that. Him sort of standing there, moving with his speed, avoiding the laser beams. I really liked that. And then eventually, of course, taking it down. And then having to to power up at the end, as we see, just really, really good, establishing this character. I like that they kind of use, which I could not think of it. Which Superman, which version of Superman is the one that was wearing the hoodie? Is that Smallville? Like when he's like, there's like a newspaper where he's wearing a hoodie, I feel like, or am I mixing that up with the Green Arrow?
You might. I mean, everybody's wearing a hoodie in Smallville except Clark, who is just in his red like bomber jacket and blue T-shirt. I think, and that I want to say there's a cover to the comic book Superman Earth 1. I think it's like he has like the S is kind of poking through the shirt, but he's in like a leather jacket and he has a hoodie pulled up over it. There's definitely there's definitely like Superman before he's Superman flying around in a hoodie. Like there's definitely some comic covers and things with that sort of motif on it.
It's really effective if you weren't going to do the Superman suit right off the bat. I think that's pretty great. I love you kind of get the POV shots where you're basically confirming Lois has no way of being able to tell that this is Clark, because she never sees his face. She doesn't hear him speak. Even though his hood gets knocked off a couple of times. I was a little surprised that they kind of showed him like getting a black eye. And I don't know if that's established later on as to why that may have happened, or if he's still just kind of weak or whatever, or this super power up thing he needs to do in order to, because he kind of has this healing factor thing that happens after that. His eyes swollen shut. He looks really worse for wear. And then he does the power up and then he's like fully healed again. So maybe that's explained on a later episode. But anyway, I love that sequence. Again, the animation is really smooth, unsurprisingly modern animation. It looks good. The characters are great. And I think that the action sequence at the end is probably the standout, of course. So for all those reasons, and really based on that action sequence alone at the end, mixed with the comedy, of course, that we get, some of the visual comedy, I ended up giving another 8 out of 10 for my animation and visuals.
Yeah, I once again, we're 2 for 2 so far. I also went with an 8 out of 10 for visuals and animation. Really strong start. Again, as far as action goes, you get, other than that little opener in Smallville, you really just get the final couple of minutes there with him fighting the robots. But that's such a fun, intense scene. Like it's pretty, when it's the first one is really wearing him down, like you said, and he gets like the swollen eye and everything. Like it feels pretty brutal. You feel those punches. And there's definitely some stuff like I think when he powers up where they're kind of illustrating the super speed, but it almost kind of looks like he's teleporting from spot to spot. I'm pretty sure I want to say that's almost directly lifted from Dragon Ball, if I'm not mistaken, because I think Goku has like a teleport power that's kind of visualized similarly to that. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of that. The OMAC robots, as these are, I think later revealed to be, definitely have some cool stuff. The big red lasers, like you said, and it's a classic. It's Superman versus the mechanical monsters. You can't go wrong with that. So yeah, that whole sequence feels really fun. And like I already mentioned, the shot at the end after he's defeated the final robots, and he flies up over the clouds and is sort of looking off into the sun and basking in the light for a second is a great bit as well.
Agreed. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. And as you mentioned at the top, music for this episode done by Daniel Futcher. Apologies for whichever pronunciation is incorrect. And then Dominic Lewis also responsible for this week's music as well. I, right off the bat, felt like I don't know, it felt very cinematic with the way that the show was given like the music treatment, essentially. Like right off the bat, you get the music as he kind of experiences the first flight after this very tense situation where he has to save the out of control car, which also has just some intense scene setting as you're, ramping up the tension of whether the car with the mom and the baby are going to crash. And then as he sort of experiences that first flight, you get a very classic, what feels like something you would see in a Superman movie with strings, and you get the flute coming in and kind of experiencing with him as he's flying through the skies. So right off the bat, I was like, man, I'm pretty impressed that the music right out of the chute here feels very it feels like they gave a sizable budget to include some decent music. What's interesting though is that not only is it orchestral with the traditional strings, horns, flute, but then you get a little bit of an electric guitar that comes in. So it very much feels like something very familiar for what we would experience in watching a DCAU cartoon. So it doesn't feel alien, which is good. It feels like a lot of attention was paid to certain scenes. The explanation that the kids are giving during the like where to find the docks, like the kid reporters are giving to Lois and Clark and Jimmy. There's some dinky music as they're explaining what their miniature newspaper is all about, and then it kind of changes and shifts once they realize that they may have cracked the case on where the garbage trucks are headed and down to the docks. And as of course Clark or Superman destroys the first robot, there's some really intense music, of course, that happens there, some triumphant, but then it kind of goes back down once the additional robots are released to attack him. And then of course triumphantly once he's able to overcome them. Those were really, really strong sequences. I felt like that all kind of played out. I didn't quite get, and we only get one instance where Superman shows up, but I didn't quite get an established Superman theme, which I assume was what was playing during the credits once the credits rolled.
So there is the actual My Adventures with Superman theme, which I believe is called Up, Up and Away, was apparently created by Kyle Troop and the Heretics. I think that's kind of the little rocked up version you see while they show the title card, and then yes, at the end you hear, and then there's that refrain I think that plays during the credits. You also hear when young Clark takes his first flight at the beginning, and then a little bit at the end, I think, when adult Clark is flying up into the sky. So there's a little bit of a refrain there, but it doesn't necessarily punctuate the action in some of the other moments the way we might be used to on some of the other shows.
Yeah, but overall, I thought it was strong. I really enjoyed it. I think that most of the moments that I pointed out there were the ones that really rang true to me. Did I miss any that you wanted to notate?
No, I think that about covers all the big ones. That was the stuff I noted was mostly during the Clark's flight at the beginning, and that little bit of sort of whimsical. It definitely has a very theatrical, like my first thought was like the moment where like the Disney character breaks free of whatever, like we're like at the end of Act 2 type of we know who we are now, and we're getting on to the next beat here. But yes, it's really strong overall. I thought I gave music a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, and we're 3 for 3 because I gave it the exact same score. I gave it a 7 out of 10 as well. The only other note I think I missed, one of the original time, I think I mentioned it when the second set were released, but the first mecha release, there's a really deep, like sort of doom and gloom giant robot has just been released to attack the city type of a theme. So some really, really strong and unique sounding, but also familiar in the way that didn't make us feel like we were traveling too far to another multiverse here when it comes to our animation. All right, Liam, let's wrap things up with our final category for the day, which is going to be our voice actors and actresses for this. We have a lot to cover as far as, well, actually, I guess it's not a huge cast because we didn't have a ton of characters to do. It's a lot of the same characters, but some familiar voices that you might know from other popular streaming shows, and a couple of others that are notable for sure. Let's go ahead and talk about this week's voice cast.
Absolutely. So just in some of the smaller roles, we had Azuri Hardy-Jones as Flip, the young upstart leader of the News Kid Legion. It's pretty humorous interactions that she has with Clark and Lois throughout the episode. We have Carrie Walgren playing. She both plays young Clark Kent and the old lady at the convenience store, which is that's some range. That's a bit of impressive range. I wouldn't necessarily have picked out that was the same voice both times. We have Zara Fazal playing Leslie Willis. Apologies if I'm butchering that name. She most recently she was Wonder Woman in that wonderful Suicide Squad game that came out, and everyone played and everyone liked.
That's right.
Well, no one said her voice acting was the problem with that game, so I'm sure she does a great job. But we don't get a lot from our villains in this episode. It's because, as mentioned, it so focuses on our trio of heroes that we don't really get a lot of time with our villains in this episode, at least. But she's menacing. Like we don't get a lot for her to do, but she's sufficiently menacing in the role.
Yeah, again, she has a few comedy beats that she drops with being irritated with her. I think the scene in the initial scene in the warehouse where the one lackey is kind of losing his mind at the fact they might not be able to unload these strange alien weapons, and she goes, "Why don't you just shout about it in front of all of these hired thugs and murderers that we've hired to distribute them?" I thought that was good. But yeah, not a ton for her to do. It's more reacting to other characters and certainly letting the robots do most of the talking.
Absolutely. And we have Daryl Brown as Perry White, as mentioned. Doesn't have a huge role in this episode. I think he also plays Badger, Leslie's partner in the scene. But yeah, a lot of, according to his IMDb page, a few other sort of minor voice acting roles over the years. He's also narrated some documentaries. So he definitely has a voice. Like immediately, it's interesting because it feels like and maybe this is just, they just told him, you're an older, gruff newspaper reporter. But immediately I'm like, I just expected this to be Kevin Michael Richardson or Kari Payton, voice of Cyborg,
a
lot of stuff, just because they're always cast in DC projects. So I was just waiting for them or Phil Lamar's voice. But I think Mr. Brown does a fun job. Like he has this really, he's seen it all, and he's a little bit beat down by the youthful exuberance of Lois Lane. So probably the best stuff he gets to do certainly in this episode is play off of Lois and the other interns here. But he's got that real sort of hard ass, stop fooling around. Let's get serious about this type of thing. It's a little bit of an introduction to him, but he gets a little bit of comedy to do with Lois, at least in this first one.
No, he's great. He's the straight man to all of the off the wall zaniness that's occurring in and around him by these tireless kids who are just draining every ounce of joy out of him. That he just wants them to do their job and to stop trying to be more than they are. And unfortunately, they don't care. They're going to continue getting into trouble. But he at the end, he kind of shows his hand a little bit too much when he decides not to fire them despite everything that they've done. perhaps setting himself up for more headaches down the road, unfortunately. But I imagine there's that's going to be a recurring theme throughout this show, is him being the older, wiser, the mentor to these three that just kind of has to keep putting up with their shenanigans, despite them constantly just driving him up the wall and never really doing the work that he's asking them to do.
That's right. So then we just have our main three here. We have Ishmael Saheed. Once again, a lot of apologies for probably butchering pronunciations in this episode, but playing Jimmy here. On camera, he was on the show Jury Duty, which I don't know what streaming service that was on, but it was like it's not a reality show, except I think the main guy doesn't know he's on a show. I think that's the
Oh, yeah.
It's like a mock trial. James Marsden, super cool, normal guy, is in it. But yeah, I think he's one of the other jurors on that show, and has also done some other voice acting as well. Yeah, he's like you said, he, other than just being like the youthful, let's go, Clark type of kind of just plucky young man that you might expect a Jimmy Olsen character to be. The wrinkle here, as you've already touched on, is that he has this weird, like every other sentence, he's working in something about how he thinks aliens are. He's trying to pitch his wacky conspiracies about whatever's going on. Even as Lois is kind of explaining that it's clearly the stolen military tech, he's like, no, wait, what if it's this, or what if it's the He does mention hyper-intelligent gorillas from France, which is a reference to, of course, Monsieur Mala from the Brotherhood of Evil, not that one, of a Teen Titans villain fame, Doom Patrol villain fame. So funny bits there, but yes, he's just that's like the weird little wrinkle beyond just being like the eternally positive and friendly kid that they came up with for Jimmy, is that he's also just kind of a crackpot, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, he's great. I feel like I mentioned this to you before we went on the air, but I feel like maybe they just played him a tape of Phil LaMarr doing Static, because he has a very similar cadence in the way that he delivers his lines, and that's not a bad thing. Like, obviously, Phil LaMarr is one of the greatest of all time. So whether he was or was not inspired by Phil LaMarr's performance at any point, that's what I was reminded of, and it was a good thing. I was like, oh, okay, this kind of feels comfortable. He's really good. He comes across as a very funny character. He delivers his lines with a lot of exuberance and pep and a little bit of zaniness. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed his performance. I thought it was fantastic. So that's a compliment. If he didn't, wow, like he could be the next Static if they went that route, because he's really, really good.
Absolutely. And then playing Lois Lane, we have Alice Lee as the voice here. It looks like she had a recurring role on the show Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, and several other on-camera roles, and a few other voice acting roles as well. Again, for this version of Lois Lane, just like nailed it off the bat. You have this. She just has so much life to her. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, but she has that confidence, and that sort of, like we said, the confidence and the drive to get the story that you expect any version of Lois to have, but it's just wrapped up in this sort of youthful. Maybe she's a little less. She's not at the top of her game yet. She's still an intern, so there is still a little bit of like shakiness to her. She's a little bit more of like in like fake it till you make it.
I was
confidence mode.
Like, you stole that directly. Like, that was the next word out of her mouth. Like, she's faking it till she makes it. Like, very, very clearly. Like, she still has the ruthlessness of what ultimately is going to make a good reporter, and pushing boundaries and trying to gain access. We're not taking no for an answer and all that stuff. But she's very clearly not 100% confident in her own ability, which is why you see her sort of she doesn't quite backtrack, but once she realizes that her being dishonest with Clark has led to him decide to go off on his own and leave them, it does kind of affect her. Even if she's not really ready to accept blame yet, it does affect her, and she's not as ready to stick to her guns yet. So yeah, I feel like that comes across in Miss Lee's performance very, very well, and clearly has a lot of chemistry with both Mr. Saheed and then ultimately our lead for Superman himself.
Absolutely. And speaking of which, we are introduced to our Superman here, the voice of Jack Quaid, probably best known for his role on The Boys as Huey on that show. Of course, was also in a couple of the Hunger Games movies, I believe, and a few other things. Does a voice on Star Trek Lower Decks, which I know is a very popular show. Again, I feel like I'm almost a broken record here, but embodying this version of Superman, I think I already used the word himbo once, but he's just like you can just get immediately the sense he's a good person. He knows what he's like. He has this idea of what he wants to be in the world. He wants to be a reporter. He wants to uncover the truth, but he's also still kind of he's just timid. Like he's still out in the world by himself for the first time and still dealing with this concern and anxiety that one day somebody's going to figure out that he's not normal. And then his being nervous makes him more prone to sort of to do something silly, right. Like, so like tear his shoe in half or tear the faucet off the hinge in his sink or whatever. So he's just got this really like fun, like you get an immediate sense he's such a good person. You have that inherent goodness that you always want a Superman to have, but you also get the feeling, again, I guess in a different way than Lois, he has that feeling of like you can see who he's going to grow into being. Mm-hmm. But this one right now, like he doesn't quite have the confidence or doesn't have the know-how of how to figure out, okay, how do I be this hero and use these incredible abilities to save people and help people, and also be a guy who has a job and friends and a normal life. I mean, that's, as we said, that's the whole title of the episode, and him trying to balance that out and his just sort of manic, nervous energy that he has throughout the whole episode.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head right there. It's an anxiety that it's what if Superman had like an anxiety disorder, essentially. Mm-hmm. Like he's just carrying it around, like as is established in this episode from the beginning to the final scene. He's still trying to discover, like, who is he? What does he do? Is he just a reporter? Like, is he someone that has all of these unique abilities and this inherent desire to help people, but he just uses it to be a really good reporter? Or is he something more than that? Is he somebody that has to stand up for truth and justice and has to defend the weak and step up when evil is present? So he's still sort of balancing that and trying to determine where he fits into everything. And at least for this episode, I think the performance comes off as very authentic. The mumbling and bumbling through the different lines and the way that he sort of tries to come off as suave and smooth and flirting with Lois, and then is immediately like knocked down 15 pegs by this older woman owning the bakery, and then just willing to accept his fate. Like, all right, I'm done. This is good. He says, bye. This is over. Hey, see you never again, or whatever he says. He's like, so it's really, really funny. I think it balances that perfectly, and you can kind of see it, the confidence come out, even though it's only a couple of lines, but after he's defeated the robots and after he's up there flying around, and who am I? Like, he's sort of impressed with his own activity, but it's also, so it's somewhat rhetorical, but it's also really, he's trying to figure out where he fits in the world, which is very relatable and feels very authentic to making Superman as human as possible while having this absolutely insane set of powers. And I think that we've talked about it before. That's the core of a really, really authentic Superman interpretation. Like, he is human and just happens to have all of these powers, even though he's born on Krypton. Like at his core, at his heart, he is middle American human man that is to his core human first, and then he just has to figure out how everything else kind of fits around that part of his personality. So I think in the little bit that we saw here, that performance, that sort of unnerved, anxious, manic sort of personality certainly comes out and establishes that as for the rest of the series.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a fun little trivia note, which I just remembered looking over his filmography. Jack Quaid, also one of very few actors, in fact, it might just be him and Yuri Lowenthal, that have voiced both Superman and Spider-Man.
Whoa.
Jack Quaid playing one of the Peter Parker variants. Oh, maybe it was just a Peter Parker. There's your technicality there, but played in the Across the Spider-Verse movie, and then of course plays Superman here. Yuri Lowenthal being the Spider-Man of all the PlayStation games, and also the Legion of Superheroes animated series. So there's a fun fact. Not a lot of people get to play more than one mega iconic pop culture icon superheroes, and here Jack's gotten to do too. So
there you are.
Yeah, I think he does a really good job, and yeah, for all the reasons we mentioned, like I said, we don't really get a lot out of our other casts, but honestly the strength of our three leads is so strong for, again, especially hitting the ground running in your first episode. I ended up giving voice acting a very strong 9 out of 10.
Well, call the newspapers, because it's a perfect 4 for 4. We pitched a perfect game here.
Round the kids and shoot the neighbors.
That's right. It is a clean sweep here across the board as far as identical scores, because I also gave voice acting a 9 out of 10. Yeah, I was really impressed again with just how everybody's performance came across. It matched the tone of everything you were seeing with this unique, more Eastern animation influenced version of these characters, and I just felt like it was coming out of the chute. Like, you have to kind of establish that you only get one shot at a first impression, as the saying goes, and they impressed me, at least. Which I guess leads us to talk about rewatchability here. Liam, where are we landing with this? Again, it's hard when we are watching a show that we haven't ever reviewed before and is outside of our main continuity here. This is obviously an episode you have rewatched, as this is your second watch through here. My first time, but as far as, hey, if somebody asks me now and says, hey, like, what do you know about this My Adventures with Superman? I'd be like, yeah, like, I'd advise you to give it a shot. I'd watch it again. I hope that we get the opportunity to do more reviews of this show in future, Elseworlds opportunities. It's fun. It didn't feel like it was, it was a slog to get through. The action was great. The storytelling was fun. The voice acting was good. The music was good. So I'd give this, I don't know that I can give it 2 thumbs up, because I don't know that I assume because it's the pilot, it's important to the series. But I also don't know if you could just drop in watching the other episodes and not understand what's going on yet. So I give it like a 1 thumb up. No halves here, but 1 thumb up, I'd say. Like, yeah, this is something that I would encourage people to watch and check out if you haven't, because it's fun. It's good.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's fun. It's an easy watch. And yeah, as far as for the series itself, it's obviously very important, because it's the first meeting of these this iconic trio that they're setting up of Clark, Lois, and Jimmy. So yeah, it's and as you said, just a great time, a lot of fun to watch. So easy to give this a recommendation for sure.
That's right. And totaling up our scores, Liam, by the way, I got so excited about our clean sweep here that I didn't give our final scores. But since they are exactly the same, we ended up with a 33 out of 40 for this episode by my math. So as far as rewatchability, we're in agreement there as well, and certainly looking forward to checking out additional episodes of this in the future. Also, of course, as we mentioned, season 2 debuting very soon. So if you haven't checked it out, you want to give it a watch through just to see how you think about it. We'd love to hear your feedback, or whether or not you also enjoyed it, or maybe you didn't enjoy it, and that's okay, because we're allowed to have opinions on things that differ. So if you did or did not, we love to hear whatever that opinion is by letting us know, and you can do so by tweeting at us on Twitter, or formerly Twitter, now X, at DCAU Review. You can send us a message on Instagram at DCAU Review there. You can even comment on our videos on the Pod Tower on YouTube if you want to, if you listen to us there. That's one way also to support us, of course. Follow us on those social media pages, subscribe to the Pod Tower. You can also support the podcast by checking out the show notes. There is a link to our store there, as well as a link to become a monthly supporter of the podcast. We have a few monthly supporters that donate their hard-earned dollars every single month to support the pod. If you want to join their ranks, we would very much appreciate that. And we thank those that do give of their hard-earned dollars every single month to help us continue to do what we do. You can also support the podcast by leaving a review on your favorite podcast app. So if you listen on a podcast app, leave a 5-star review for us. That helps us out a lot. If it's Apple Podcasts, and you can leave a little blurb about what you enjoy about the pod. You can also, if you do that, leave a 5-star review, and we read it here on the air, and you live in the continental United States, we'll even send you a little thank you gift for doing so. So rush on over there and do that today if you will. Liam, we are turning the page here in the month of May, saying goodbye at least, and headed to the warm summer month of June here in the United States. So let's talk about what we'll be tackling next month, shall we?
That's right, Cal. And I guess once again, it is time to look towards the future.
The future, Liam?
That's right. All the way to the year that's 50 years from now, whenever now is. We're looking at Batman Beyond and Zeta Project next month, and kicking it off with another episode of Batman Beyond. Of course, that show's celebrating its 25th anniversary this year, and kicking off with a very important episode that will also set up some future Justice League reviews of ours. That being The Call, Part 1.
Ooh, that is going to be a good one. Excited to take a look at that one. It's been several years since I've seen that one. Definitely have not watched it in the time frame since we've been doing the podcast. So many years since I've watched that one. So excited to look back on that one as we look at, speaking of the Man of Steel, Superman's first appearance on Batman Beyond, coming next week. That episode review. Very excited. Can't wait. But until then, I'm Cal. And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.